Thank you for coming out for our kids mini conference and our next event, which is Global Growth in Comics and Graphic Novels. My name is Erin Cox. I'm the U.S. publicist for the Frankfurt Book Fair, and today we're going to talk about a few things. These are the things we're going to tackle today. I'm going to dive in and get into it. A deep dive into the comics and graphic novels market around the world, highlighting where in the world there has been growth and emerging future markets, what types of art and themes work well in which markets, how are readers and fans discovering this work, and what the future holds for this segment of our wonderful industry. So I'm going to ask my panelists here to introduce themselves, their name, their title, and their company, please. Would you start? Do you have a microphone?
Okay, yeah. My name is Alessandra Sternfeld, and I own a literary agency called I Am Book that represent the rights to comic books for children and adults, and also various type of illustrated books.
Hi, I'm Lara Allen, and I am the rights director at Wattpad WEBTOON Studios. I handle rights around the world for both the Wattpad and WEBTOON platforms.
Hello, I'm David Saylor. I'm the VP and publisher of the Graphix line of books, imprint at Scholastic in New York, and that's it.
Okay, good. I'm going to start by asking you all the same question, and I'd like you to answer from your own perspective in the industry. So, over the last several years, there's been huge sales growth in the comic and graphic novel sector of the industry. To what do you attribute this growth, and where have you seen the most growth for your own business? David, why don't you kick it off?
Sure. I mean, it's been astonishing. Graphix was founded in 2005, and at that point in time, there was no shelf space in bookstores for kids' graphic novels. And now we've come to a place where there are many, many bookshelves full of graphic novels. So it's been gratifying to see that a need was met in the publishing world, and that we were able to publish a lot of books that have become bestsellers in the children's book market. Seeing how things have evolved over the past 18 years has been impressive. And I think that comics were always an incredibly powerful medium, and kids were hungry for comics, but there wasn't much being published for kids. So I think that what we were able to do was to create books that kids loved and would fall in love with. And if they were able to get them in the book fairs or in their schools or in their libraries or at the local bookstore, they would buy them. And I thought of that because when I was a kid, when I was 8 and 9, I loved comics. And then when I was an adult working for Scholastic, I realized that we weren't publishing comics for kids. So I thought, well, here's an opening in the market. Here's a need. I know that kids love comics. It's a very powerful tool for storytelling. So we need to get into this, and we need to create books that are going to fill that need for kids.
Nice. Lara?
I come from a little bit of a different perspective because we are doing digital publishing. So for us, it comes from a bit digital space, and the rise has coincided with social media and with a growth in interest in Korean content in particular, and manhwa. On our platform, we cover all different types of genres and age groups. In fact, we just did a very nice deal with Scholastic for one of my favorites. So I think there are lots of different things that have contributed to the growth and interest in these titles. I think the pandemic has certainly contributed to it. But I also think that when you're considering Gen Z, and from my perspective, the majority of the content that is on our platform is YA. From that perspective, these are young people that have grown up in a fan culture. It's a post-Harry Potter world. And I think that they're used to consuming stories in a variety of different ways. And I think that, I do think that there are lots of other contributing factors, but I think that can't be ignored in the power that it's had over Gen Z and their reading habits.
Yeah, definitely. Alessandra?
So my perspective is a bit different because a big part of my market is also adult graphic novel, and when I started 10 years ago, it was still, I think, very much a niche market with mostly specialized indie publisher, while in the past 10 years, basically every big publisher has started a comics line that before they didn't have. Everybody's trying to do comics now. Everybody's starting to do comics. People that like you would never suspected. And so that's surprising because like we are selling a lot. Other than that, why I think this happened, I mean, I really don't have the answer. My personal disenchanted opinion is that, you know, like how the human brain has evolved or de-evolved with the digital revolution, you know, and how you scroll and you are visual, you have less capacity to really concentrate, you know, to read like a really beautiful novel. Sometimes you really have to read 100 pages before you really get hooked. And now people don't have the span for concentration, but I think that human desire for art and meaning and something that is just have some kind of like literary value still persists. So with the comic book, especially for adults, that just really like, it's immediate. It's kind of like Instagram, but has a literary value. It's the image grasping, it's the text is like shorter and it's the rhythm is easier to follow to like bypass your internet brain fog, pretty much.
I like that.
I don't know. I mean,
Instagram,
that's my
but
interpretation.
literary. I like that. I like that. Well, I like that, David, since you started Graphix 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago, do you feel like you're ahead of all these upstarts who are trying to do it now? You know?
I do feel like we have a bit of an advantage just because we've been doing it now for quite a while. And, you know, partly because we have deep ties to the comics community through the people that we publish. And I've been going to Comic-Con since 2000, I believe, something like that. So I've been going to Comic-Con for a long time, talking with comics creators, trying to get them to trust a major publisher like Scholastic and to feel comfortable publishing their work with us. There was a lot of distrust at the beginning about whether we were sort of carpetbaggers coming in to, you know, raid the comics book world, and happily that wasn't the case. And in fact, we were often given much better deals for creators with their work because they own their own work, they own the copyright to their work. So once we sort of broke down those barriers, people were really eager to publish, you know, with Graphix at that time. Mm-hmm. And I think also, I mean, to sort of go back a little bit to what's the turning point and why graphic novels are so popular, I think that there's been a history, particularly in the U.S., of comics being bad for you, of them not being real books, of them not being literature, they're not being of any value. And that took place, you know, in the 1950s in America. There was sort of a movement talking about how comics were bad for kids. And so it took many, many years for that stigma to go away. And it did slowly go away, frankly, through the work of librarians and teachers who realized that kids loved graphic novels, and it also got them reading in a huge way. And so they wanted every tool at their disposal to get kids to read, and graphic novels were certainly one of those tools. And kids aren't necessarily going to read just graphic novels or just prose books. They're going to often read both, or many will read both. So I think there was that tipping point in U.S. culture that happened, you know, right around the time that we started, 2005. And I would say that partly because Scholastic said comics are important, that meant something to a lot of people. It meant something to librarians. It meant something to teachers. It meant something to parents. The fact that we were creating these books meant that, oh, these are real books. There's something to be gotten from them. There's a message. There's a meaning. There is value in what this work is. And I think that was sort of a tipping point.
Mm-hmm. If I may just add, I'm sure you had seen there was an article in, I think, School Library Journal that talked about this very rise among school librarians, and they're ordering more graphic novels than ever before. I was very heartened by that for all of the reasons that you've been saying, and because I know so many people, myself included, that had started out reading comics. And I did, like David has mentioned, read a lot of prose in addition to it, but it was not considered literature. And it was very nice to see that rise among school librarian orders and the support of school librarians within the U.S. for that reason.
Definitely. Are you seeing this in libraries around the world for other books of yours?
I don't really, because I'm an agent, I don't really deal with librarians. That would be like what the publishers do. But one thing I do see from the trend that it's really starting to have a literary dignity within itself, that really even 10 years ago, that was a lot harder. Like, for example, in Italy, where I'm from, the biggest literary prize is the Strega Prize. Yeah. And a few years ago was the first year that one graphic novel was nominated along a lot of like narrative fiction books. And that's like growing and growing. That it's becoming literary. It can be literary fiction just at the same level, or like non-fiction also.
Yeah, definitely. David, I wanted to ask one other question. Was since you've been publishing, you said things have changed over the years because you have more shelf space. You now have better relationships with the creators. Over the maybe in the last few years, has the mission for Graphix changed? Have the types of voices that you've been able to showcase changed? How has it changed sort of in the last 5-10 years?
I think just because of the success of Graphix and of graphic novels, we'll be able to publish more stories. I mean, more books per year. We were probably publishing about 6 to 8 books a year in the first few years that we published, and I think now we're probably up to 30 plus books a year. So that already is a huge difference in terms of just the number or the volume of material that we're putting out. And yes, because of the success of our authors, Raina Telgemeier, Kazuki Buishi, Jeff Smith, Dave Pilkey, there's a lot of people that want to publish into this category, and it's all kinds of stories. So I think that it's opened up the world to many, many, many different stories. And so that's our mission, I would say, hasn't changed. I just want to do more of it, with a curated list, but doing more great material for all the things that we're publishing.
Yeah. And are some stories versus others like sort of traveling beyond the U.S.?
Yeah, there's certainly Dave Pilkey travels worldwide. I mean, I think humor travels worldwide in some ways, and he's one of the funniest, most brilliant creators that I know. So he does really well. And also, Raina Telgemeier does well in some countries. Amulet, I think, is in 14 languages around the world. So yeah, a lot of our books have been translated and are being, accepted and embraced, around the world, which is great.
Yeah, that's great. Alessandra, can you talk a little bit about some artists and writers that you work that sort of have fan bases that maybe go beyond their home base?
Yes. One of the biggest one, I think, is Liv Strömquist. She is a Swedish non-fiction comics author. Sweden is a peculiar market because the comic scene is huge, but it's mostly women, feminist creators. Yeah. But it's good, it's a market, they sell a lot. And so Liv Strömquist, she did one book that was called The Fruit of Knowledge. That was the story of the female sex organ in comic book form. And I sold that one. Now, it was really it was actually deep, had a lot of critical theory, but with mainstream examples. I sold that one in 25 languages. They publish it even in Taglish, it's not Tagalog, it's not English, it's a mix that they say, even that one. I was like, okay, and she, for example, she does amazing in Germany and in France. I sell one of her book when she has 4 pages ready in. Wow. That's a particular case, and other ones that. Some people that are really big, for example, in social media, that really helps them break the borders. Like Simon Hanselman, one of my clients, which is a big alternative cartoonist from Australia, and he lives in the US. He did this episodic comic during the pandemic, and that became viral, and then became a book, and then we sold. That also helped us opening more markets for him. But yeah, I mean, I think it really depends. Also, it happened to me that authors that were completely unknown, they were published in 10 or 15 countries. Yeah, I had a book about a comic about a young Syrian refugee girl where she travels on the boat to come, to Europe. She drowns to death. It's a book for children. It's really
wow.
That one, and the authors were unknown. What happened that they invited me to Copenhagen Comic Con one year, and I was like, okay, sure, if you invite me. But in order to go there, and they paid everything, the ticket from America, I had to review portfolios. So I was reviewing 100 portfolios, super hangover. I was like, oh my God, this is hell. And then I saw this book, I saw this book and the authors were like 50 something and they were really famous in Denmark but nowhere else. And I was like, wow, this book is really timely. This was 2017 or 2016. Have you sold this anywhere? And they were like, no. So 18 countries. I think it's the most sold Danish comics in history or something like that. But it was like really like, it's a children like, for 10 years old more or less. But that was like, they were completely unknown. And it was like a New York Times, they had a huge review in the New York Times in English. And
what do you attribute that success to? Just the timeliness of the story?
Yes, for sure. And the fact that it was very immediate, that the art worked, the art was very like, kind of like universal.
Right.
I don't want to say, like it wasn't like too, like, everybody could like,
classic?
Yes.
Classic, you might say?
Not classic, more like plain.
Plain.
Like, not like plain in a bad way.
Simple, but not bad. Right.
Yes,
something
exactly.
that didn't have like a specific country or
yes, or it was
tone.
too like because a lot of time art is about taste. Something that I think it's amazing. Someone else like may think they don't like it, but this was kind of like nobody could really think it's bad because he knew how to draw, but it wasn't like trying to be like virtuous or
right.
So it was a mix of this thing, but the story immediately, but yeah.
Well, let's talk to. Sorry, this wasn't on any questions that I shared ahead of time, but a question that came up from here. When you're working with artists, do you think about audiences beyond your sort of home market?
Well, I certainly do. Yeah.
Lara?
I mean, for me, I have a rights background.
Right.
I am always thinking internationally, but also I one of the things that I really like about Wattpad WEBTOON Studios is that it is internationally focused, both on the film adaptation side and on publishing. So I think about where can this sell, and one of the other things that I think is amazing about the platforms are two very important things. One is incredible creativity, very creator focused across all genres. There's so much imagination and talent, and you take things like Lore Olympus, which is huge hit and a New York Times bestseller, and then you've got stuff like horror from Grimoire Land and Hooves of Death, which is unicorns in the zombie apocalypse. I mean, it goes all over the place. And Safi, the One-Eyed Couch, is the Scholastic will be doing. I think that that's a really incredible space to be in. So because it is such unique stories, there's bound to be international interest throughout all of that. So I'm in a lucky position in that it's a worldwide company. These creators come from all over the world. So there is a lot of international interest. But another part that I think is really important and kind of plays into this is that for WEBTOON, the majority of readers are young women. It's 60% are Gen Z, 15 to 25. So I think that with young women, someone is doing a study on it. It hasn't been concluded, so I do not have the statistics to back this up. But I do know that part of that study seems to be showing that young women are very loyal to both platforms and authors. And that is a worldwide thing. That figure is worldwide. And I think that's lovely. And I don't know that there's other spaces for young women with comics specifically, and especially commercial type stories that like WEBTOON. And that has international appeal. So, and when we're talking about the growth of comics and where we're seeing growth of in sales and things, a lot of it is from publishers, from my end, from my business. It's publishers who do young adult romance or new adult romance, and they're looking for WEBTOONs in exactly the same genres because they know that those young women will follow them to those stories.
Wow. Do we so we don't really see as much in print comics for young women?
Well,
or we don't know.
Right now we're starting to because of Lore Olympics.
Right.
So Lore Olympus. Olympics is a different thing. But for example, there is one of my most successful translated comics is Curse Princess Club, which is this glorious, subversive story on the Princess Trope, and has a lot to do with body dysmorphia. And that is very commercial. I think it depends on the type of story. And it's growing, and it comes out of the YA market and YA romance in general and new adult. And I think if you can get a young woman to fall in love with something, then they will follow you. They are very forgiving readers and fans. The most important thing is they are fans, absolute fans.
David?
I would just say that it was interesting for me because there was a lot of sort of perceived wisdom about comics when we were first starting Graphix, that comics were just for boys because of superhero comics and that sort of thing. And I quickly realized that there's a huge readership of women and girls. I mean, that's really the majority probably of our readers. And so something like the Babysitter's Club is a huge hit for us. As in graphic novel format, and I know that boys read it too, but it's definitely young women and girls that are really gravitating toward our comics, and also they're the creators. So many creators that I meet are women, and young women who grew up with comics, young women who grew up with reading Bone or reading other comics that we've published, and that want to create their own comics. So it's a really vibrant, active world.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about finding creators and sort of creators creating themselves on a platform such as Wattpad, WEBTOON, where they're creating it and building their own fan bases a little bit. So maybe each of you can sort of talk a little bit about how you find creators or writers that you want to work with, and how you start to spot somebody that you think is moving ahead. David, you want to start?
I can start, certainly. I mean, what was interesting is that Raina Telgemeier, who did the book Smile and Guts and Sisters and did the Babysitter's Club adaptations, she was one of the first people that was posting her comics online on a website that was free, and she would post like panels each week, and she built up an audience that way. And that's when I first read the Smile comic, was online at this website, and I was like, we have to publish this book. I hadn't seen anything like it. I hadn't seen something from a young woman's perspective about growing up and having dental problems and dealing with all of that. And she was very smart because she was posting online, got a little bit of a fan base, but mostly it was for her friends talking about it and other publishing people talking about it. But it led to this incredible book that we published that I think ended up breaking a lot of ground, because it was sort of a memoir, but there really wasn't anything else out there for young girls talking about that time in their life and going through that kind of an experience. And the other example I can think of course, is Alice Oseman with Heartstopper, because she was posting all of those comics online, and they're still available online if you want to read them. But then from that, she became a publishing phenomenon, with her books. So, those are great examples of people using the online resource and creating an audience and building their own careers basically from scratch. So,
I think that you have kind of hinted on something, which is it isn't like these are casual creators who are doing it as a hobby.
Right.
There is excuse me. They are actually business people and they are doing this for a living. And I think, and it isn't that it is overly calculated, it is that they are doing something they love, but they genuinely want to make a living out of it. So on the WEBTOON side, we have Canva, which is if you are starting out at the very, publishing your own stuff, it starts with Canva, and then you can go to WEBTOON, where we have editors and we have content specialists who read this constantly, and they are fans. So when we talk about how something comes to my attention, a lot of it is because we work with a bunch of fans. We are constantly reading material. We have over 200 something stories that I am trying to sell publishing rights to, and I've looked through them. I know what the majority of them are, and I can speak to them. I can speak about the art, and I can speak about how the story develops. I can see whether they're and how interactive the creator is with their, and I think that's an important aspect, at least in the online space. The creator has to interact with the people that are reading it. That it is a social. There's a social aspect when you're doing this kind of digital publishing that's very important. But it doesn't necessarily have to go beyond our platform. It isn't like. Because I do work for Wattpad, I can see a lot of that as well. With Wattpad, it's not like you have to be on Book Talk in order to sell a WEBTOON story. As long as you're interacting and posting regularly and have a plan, which a lot of them are, they're business people. Then you can develop a fan base and get your story out there in a really wonderful way. By the way,
Alessandra, how do you find people that you work with?
How do I find people that I work with? Like
Microphone.
God only knows. But
Social media.
no, it's like
There's comic.
like Simon Hanselman, for example, which is one of my biggest clients, which I think is like one of the most important alternative comic artist today. And I found this Tumblr when I was like 25, and I just quit my job and I was unemployed, and I was like, listen, can I try to sell this? And he was like, do what you want. And so it's like, now it's like, he's one of Fantagraphics' most sold authors, and he's like in 14 languages now, and he's developing like TV series. How did I do? I don't think that's a model that I could replicate like ever. Like if I saw him like a week later, it would have been too late. And if he was a slightly different personality, he would have told me like, "Who are you?" Like I had no credential, no clients, no. You know what I mean? I think I quoted like Tennessee Williams in my email to him or something like that. It was someone else would have been like, "That's not my thing." Bye. Other than that, generally, because I only do the kind of like stuff that I like, which is, I think it's more like niche or artsy or literary, like you have to sell a lot of books to be able to pay like salaries of the people that work with me. I prefer to work for publishers, like publisher catalogs. That's for me, they're just like better because like they select what they think is good, and if I trust them, then I just sell. But then for individual author, I think it's a mix of Instagram. I use Instagram. I feel like more than the average agencies, because like Illustrator write me, and I put a lot of things and yes, I think Instagram, publishers, the book fairs, and that's it. I would say,
Yeah, that's good. How are most people interacting with the content? Like, are they looking at it on their phone? Are they do they have physical books? Are they looking at it on a desktop? What are you seeing with any of you?
Readers?
Yeah, readers.
I think my case is a bit different because like I do books that are basically sometimes even art books, so it like makes no sense. Like it's a sect. I like vintage everything. I feel like that's why I'm in this type of books, because these are type of books that it would be like a crime to read them on like an iPad, I think people buy the type of book I license. It's like half the story and half because it's like a really cool object to have, That's a huge part of book publishing today, because it is it. Like at the end of the day, the people that like that, they want to have beautiful objects, and that's kind of like, at least like this niche that I do, it's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Lara and David, when you're creating print books, do you think of that same thing as that this is a piece of art in some way?
I wouldn't necessarily call. Well, maybe. For us, I really do not think you can underestimate the power of being a fan. And I think this is what's really interesting, is that a lot of the times when I'm speaking to a publisher, because there are so many new imprints, I kind of have to do a very 101 about not only about comics, really. And I think that with both both of the platforms that I work for, people don't understand why you would buy something physical when you can read it online. But you're still thinking about readers, and these aren't readers, these are fans, and they want to buy something that is a collectible and reminds them of a good experience, and it is a different thing. So while you do want something, especially when you're dealing with the content that you get off WEBTOON, it cannot be, it's not a disposable object. What we have previously thought comics to be, a 50-cent or $2 slim volume. It is something that you are going to go back and reread while also engaging with it on a platform. So I do think that's because it is, in our case, because it is published digitally, and these creators have a chance to interact with the people that are reading and their fans. Those fans know that they have played a significant part in the success. There's a little bit of I don't want to say ownership, but they're proud of that, and they want to have a physical thing that shows that attachment.
Collaboration, maybe?
Collaboration, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the demise of the book has been predicted for years and years and years now, but it's not going away. I think a book is a perfect object, and it doesn't require electricity or anything else. And I love the fact that kids still want books. They want the physical objects. They want to collect them. They want to have them. They want to page through them. They want to write notes in them. And so even though we produce ebooks are a very small percentage of what's sold for kids anyway. So I think the value of the book isn't going away, and it's fascinating, like with the synergy between webtoons and online comics and then publishers, because it's like an extension of something that's already there that fans want, and it's just making another version of it that they can love. So it's like extending the love of a character, a series, a feeling, and then it just keeps going.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll turn it over to the audience in case they have questions. But of course, we're very familiar with all of the superhero movies that came from comic books. Are we seeing other kinds of stories that are being adapted into film, television, other kinds of mediums that anybody can speak to?
Sure,
Lara.
Absolutely. Well, because I work for a studio, go ahead.
You can start.
Sure. So for us, very much so. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's lots of stuff that we will be announcing within the next year that I can't speak that specifically about, but certainly Lore Olympus is a good example of that. There's also a title called Grummery Land, which is kind of a horror. Very interesting. I love it. And we are working with Vertigo Entertainment on that. And and when you look at a lot of Netflix adaptations, a great deal of them came from Korean webtoons initially, which people don't necessarily realize. Heartstopper is a really good example, and but also All of Us Are Dead and Tower of God and True Beauty. These are examples of very popular comic adaptations, and it's a really good marriage when you think about it, because it's almost like you've got a storyboard already. The story, it's visual. You've done a lot of the work. Mm-hmm. So we are seeing an enormous interest from film and television on these adaptations.
Good. Yeah, Alessandra, you mentioned one of your clients who is it a TV series?
They're developing it, but yes, it's there is a lot of interest from the Netflix guys always, but then I don't know, because again I think what I do is very different from what they do, so it's a completely different. I think yours has way more
commercial success.
Yes, mine I had a graphic novel about a horror set into a luxury spa, Scandinavian, and that one, in Hollywood, they killed each other for it. And I was like, but this guy was not he was a Swedish artist, kind of like a cult underground, but he wasn't like nothing what they're talking about, smart, he was cool, but not sweating dollar bills. And I remember that book, I have a mailing list, of like with a lot of like book scouts, like guy that works for like the Hollywood agencies, that, like they read one of the 10 emails that I send, and that one, it was crazy. And even after I sold that one, I sold it to a French horror director that was represented by a big Hollywood company. Like months later, like they would call me up, producer, and I wouldn't pick up, and they would call 3 times, and then I would just be like, I would be in Italy with my children, like in bed, and they would call again. And I'm like, dude, for this? Like, okay, but like, that's just that, I like to be dramatic, I think, and that's like a case that was, but it's more like, again, it's not that, it's like, it's more like maybe like a director that falls in love with the book, that reads it by chance and really falls in love and wants to do like an indie film. Or I had a book lately that was nominated for the Academy Award. Yeah, but that was like a short movie made in Greenland, low budget. It's it's a completely different thing. But yeah, the interest is there from like the Amazon Scout, Netflix Scout. They always ask what's good. But then again, I don't think that type of comic, it's necessarily very palatable to them.
David?
Yeah, and a lot of our books have been optioned. There's definitely been interest expressed, but getting from the option to the actual thing being made is quite a leap. So I'm waiting to see the actual movie
Through
of
that,
a lot of our
yes.
books.
All right, we'll take some questions from the audience. Do we have any questions? Yep. Let's have the mic anyway.
All right.
Gets me up
Hi.
out of my seat. Go.
I'm Gisela Michelle Anderson. I'm a librarian at a public school in Texas, a Title I school. Cannot keep graphic novels on my shelves. In Texas, we're having a lot of issues right now with what we are allowed to purchase. I would love to be able to get more graphic novels on my shelf for like my 3rd through 5th grade age students. I can't keep Babysitters Club, Little Babysitters, Amulet, anything Dave Pilkey on the shelves. Do you have things coming down the pipes that...
We do. I mean, one thing I can tell you about is that we just acquired a property called Unico, which is the first manga that we're going to be publishing at Graphix. It's a manga that was created by Osamu Tezuka back in the 1970s. It's being reimagined for a new generation by Samuel Satin, who's an American writer, and by the artist team Gurihiru in Japan. And Tezuka Productions is actively involved with it, and we just signed up 6 books. And the first book is coming out in summer of 2024. And so I'm super excited by that. It's definitely for that 8 to 12-year-old age group. It's about a unicorn who goes through these incredible adventures and is sort of manipulated by the gods and goddesses around him who are trying to thwart his positive effect on human beings. So it's like a fabulous story, and I'm so excited for everyone to see it. So that's my pick for you. Yep. Okay. Yep. Absolutely.
Even my book vending machine, all my Scholastic graphic novels.
Thank you. I love hearing that. That's a beautiful thing to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions from the audience? Yep. I saw you in the audience. I hoped you had a question.
Hi, so I'm French, so I come from a country where we have a really strong tradition of comic books and manga, and it's very popular to see very young kids reading comic books and mangas. This was my case as well. Not sure looking back it was entirely age appropriate, but that's a different question. And as a result, as like a young professional in France, I'm seeing that even parents are very open to WEBTOON and digital manga, manhwa, all of this stuff. And I think that's linked. I think that's linked to our kind of strong comic manga tradition. So I guess maybe this is a rude question, but has there been pushback in the United States, or maybe Alessandra can also say in Italy, against digital comics, or is it all kind of being accepted under the same umbrella? Does my question make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
That's interesting. That is a very interesting question. I mean, part of this is linked to what we're going through with these censorship arguments throughout the United States. And I think as far as the United States is concerned, it very much is, it depends on what state you're in. It depends on where you are within the United States. I think I have not heard of direct pushback, but I will say that one question that we continually get is, can we get age ratings within the WEBTOON platform so we can tell what is age appropriate and what isn't? A lot of that comes from librarians. Librarians drive a lot of this. And so that is something that we are looking at. I think in general, it hasn't been a huge discussion as far as digital alone, because I think your question also is, does digital have these different discussions around it? We haven't seen that. It is part and parcel of our more overall discussion around censorship that our country is going through, as in my experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Otieno from Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. I'm an author of graphic novels for kids as well. And my question to the three of you is, do you have any scope or presence or are looking into any collaborations or work from Africa, knowing that we are amazing storytellers?
I think this is very interesting because I just met a U.S. publisher who specializes in African work. For us, anyone can publish on the platform, and we do have people within Africa, in African creators, especially in French language, which would probably not be you, but that's you know. For the one problem that we have is that we do not have the editorial support within Africa, and indeed in a lot of other countries. We don't have it in Germany either, that some of our creators in other countries have, which is a shame at the moment, I think, because I think there's some really amazing work coming out of Africa. But if you have a card, I will give you the name of this publisher, because he is actively very interested.
We probably have time for one more. Oh, do you want to answer?
Well, this is like different, but I think yes, this is like a great moment, I think, for creators coming from Africa, because I think like I think part of the business that works generally well is like graphic biographies and graphic adaptations. And I think before, until like 10, 15 years ago, it didn't matter who did it. Like a white guy could tell the biography of like a person of color, and it was like no problem. Right now, like I cannot sell it abroad, you know, if it's a graphic biography of Alice Walker that I have right now, and like if you don't have like a black author in there, like no, like you cannot. So I think it's really like, I can put you in touch with a guy that does graphic bios of a lot of maybe they're interested. But yeah, I think it's the answer. It's a plus, I think, rather than.
Yeah, and I think we're all certainly open to publishing anyone from anywhere. I think it's just finding the right material, the right story. If the story feels right for our market, we're eager. Yeah.
Is it also is it contemporary or is it fantasy or? Okay, because I will say that in the fantasy space, I have gotten increasingly more questions. People are looking for. They're a little sick of European set fantasy, and they are looking for fantasy that comes from other places and that are like interesting in different views. So that there's a real interest in that at the moment. Yeah.
Hi, I'm from Vietnam, and the situation is, I think, maybe it's just particularly right in my country, but there are not enough authors for children. So, and the second problem is that it seems that the children don't like the books written by adults. So my question is that, from your perspective, your experience, is it, is it particularly good or is there a good chance for children writing for themselves and being published and, having some successes from your experiences?
From us, because we are an open platform, and we actually have quite a lot of creators from Vietnam and from Southeast Asia. I think it depends on what you mean by children. I think if teenagers, 100%. There's a lot on the platform, and there are a lot of creators. And I think it's very interesting to see teenagers in particular creating stuff because they've got so much to work through. Younger than that, it's a little different, but certainly from 16 years or older, I think you could find creators. That's been my experience anyway.
Meaning things written by young children that are being published? I can't think of, it's rare that we've published children's writing, and usually it's either because they've done something extraordinary in the world and they've become famous in some way in the United States. So we've published a few books about kids that are very active in some way, or part of a social movement, or are activists in some way. But it's pretty rare, I would say.
But right now in Germany, one of my clients is publishing these comics for children that is like made by this comic artist and his daughter. Like, she came out with the concept and everything. Like, that works. And I think I've seen it before also. It's not a new idea.
Right.
But that's about it.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you to all of my panelists. Thank you to all of you. Let's give them a round of applause. And thank you all for your attention and your great questions. This concludes our Kids Mini Conference. Come back again tomorrow at 10 when we'll be having a whole other day of programming here in the Publishing Perspectives Forum. Thanks a lot.